With that, it's my privilege to introduce Brian Snow, our first keynote speaker. He's a mathematician and a computer scientist. He taught mathematics and helped found the computer science department at Ohio University in the 1960s. In 1971, he joined the National Security Agency as a crypto designer and a security systems engineer. Brian's early NSA career in research was spent developing crypto components and systems. Many such systems serving the U.S. government and military use his algorithms, and they span a range from nuclear command and control centers to tactical radios for battlefield use. He created and managed NSA's Secure Systems Design Division in the 1980s and has many patents, awards, and honors attesting to his creativity. He also has many awards for superlative management skills. Brian retired in 2006 and he now works as a security consultant. He says that the portions of his career that he enjoyed the most were working as a senior technical director at NSA from 1996 to 2002, which is the equivalent of an industry fellowship position, and driving the development of cryptographic algorithms, key management techniques, and computer security protocols, as well as developing a secure systems design course that is required of all InfoSec engineers at NSA. His expertise spans cryptographic design, security protocols, intrusion detection systems, security assessments, and evaluations. And he believes that managers are responsible for doing things right, but technical directors are responsible for finding the right things to do. With that, I give you Brian Snow.
Thank you, Kurt, very much for your very kind introduction and for mentioning my work on nuclear weapon systems. My latter work at NSA was shaped by that experience, which ingrained in me a very deep belief that, quote, this time I simply have to build it exactly right, unquote. There have been many times where there have been tensions on the world stage, and all the nations that hold nuclear weapons have the same concern. Take three nations, A, B, C. What if A has a very powerful nuclear position, lots of weaponry stocked and ready to go? Nation B doesn't, but he's mad at Nation C. If, by cyber means or others, he could enter our command and control system and cause a launch from A to strike C, and his effort is not known at the time, that would be pretty bad. I'm proud to say that on my watch and all other watches since in the U.S., that has never happened. That's one of the responsibilities of having nuclear command and control systems, as well as one of the pleasures. You've got defense for your nation, but as with any technology, it is a dual-use thing. It could be used against you as well. We've been very, very lucky, I think. And candidly, I'd much prefer there were no nuclear weapons in the world at all. But if they must exist, they must have robust control. Okay? You will find the attitude that I just mentioned, that mindset is still with me and helps form much of the advice which I will offer today. What was good for secure communications gear for the soldier in the field can also be of value to the commercial sector on the web, to the Internet of Things, devices on the web itself, and certainly mobile devices covering your doctrine. I'll be hitting many topics today, some in depth, others just enough to show connections between them. There are problems today in cybersecurity practice that impact the community as a whole, and we need to solve those problems soon. They are pervasive, ongoing, and getting worse, not better. We need to know why before we can successfully fix them. I will discuss two things today. First, the pile of examples of the boat we're in and how bad it is. And then secondly, at the end of the talk, I'll spend equal time on what it will take to get out of it, or at least mitigation attempts. There's never a complete escape, but at least you can make things a hell of a lot better than we have today. Security professionals work to counter malice, not benign nature. There is a big difference between an adaptive opponent and normal random failures or events like hurricanes. Architects cope with expected weather or other environmental factors. Once a building is up, an architect does not need to alter his design process for his next building to cope with how weather will now behave. The weather does not change based on his prior practice. It may not be benign, but it is not malicious. The security professional faces an environment that adaptively and rapidly changes to nullify his efforts, to once again obtain an advantage against his design. He must accept that standard design practices simply are not adequate in a malicious environment. Unfortunately, the cybersecurity industry has yet to fully internalize how much change is required in the design cycle, given that malice rather than random benign failures are the major driver for security failures in their products. To make it worse, their security solutions are not robust. They will soon have to be fixing them again. Security, like fruit, does not last long. Likewise, the business community has yet to fully internalize how much change, a little bit more on that one, change is required in their business operating environments if malice is present as well. Okay? Need to pay attention to those things. They need to be able to prevent or at least detect unexpected changes in data in sensitive sequences of commands and safely terminate command sequences that were not authorized, among other things. A little math speak for you. They should develop a, quote, transitive closure map, unquote, if you will, of all authorized commands that have well-defined endpoints for command sequences, so you control and actually know in your space what's sensitive, what's not, and where is the boundary within your internal code barriers where you can be less cautious. Okay? In any case, whether in a design environment or a business operating environment, I've seen a few programs where probabilistic risk assessment is used as part of the evaluation process to supposedly reduce risk. However, if malice is a factor in the expected deployment environment, an opponent can possibly diddle with the assessment environment or even the deployed environment to mislead you into putting in features that are not necessary and skipping some that are necessary than if you're just paying attention to random stuff. A better frame of reference and more natural choice is to consider using game theory and pick someone on an opposing team in your company and play a mutual game of misleading each other when possible. If you don't have a game theory jock on staff, be sure to use probabilistic risk assessment, if at all, only for environments beyond the ability, you hope, of an opponent being able to interfere. It's just a very powerful practice for building good refrigerators and stuff where you know the environment pretty well. It is not a safe practice at all to use in a security analysis. I believe most of you are aware of that. Has any of you ever been involved in a, quote, security assessment where PRA was used? Thank God. Good. No hands. All right. Right now, the community at large is applying wrong or inadequate engineering practices and taking a lot of shortcuts, adding greatly to our collective security risks. One thing that is needed to be done is to at least improve the quality and robustness of security-sensitive software. Several software development processes exist. These are formal procedures you go through to develop the code. A key factor in most of them is, quote, independent design and review teams, unquote. That's doubling the manpower at least, a team to design something and another team to review it. And you don't let them interact much or mess with each other as the task is ongoing. There's specific points when it's executed. One team designs and codes the sensitive software. A separate team accepts the code produced by the designers and will attack it, documenting all flaws they find. They should not offer fixes, just find flaws, and return the code to the designers. Repeat as necessary until the attack team gives up, saying the work's too hard now, I've done enough. Needless to say, the code should be written in accord with one of many quality control processes in existence. There are many of these formal procedures that are out there. ISO 9000, I believe, is one of the oldest. Second on the list is Carnegie Mellon's Capability Maturity Model, SEI-CMU-CMM. It has 5 quality levels to strive for. At one time, this was the gold standard of software quality control processes, but it's aged over the years. The Watts-Humphrey Team Software Process, TSP, Team Software Process, and Personnel Software Process, PSP, if you're doing both, the TSP/PSP. These processes, the feature I like about them, produce fewer errors per 1,000 lines of code than many other processes do. That's a pretty good metric and can save time in the long run too if you're looking for that. Processes like these cost more money and time to deliver, but they do produce better code. When you are really facing targeted malice, they or something like them are really, really needed. NIST also supports a variety of assurance processes, some more slightly modern than the ones discussed there. You can pick the winners and losers later, but have at least something in hand to work with. Now, NSA also does what I call assurance processes, just checks and double checks to make sure things are going well from a defeating malice viewpoint. Depending on the sensitivity of the data protected by this system, NSA can get pretty wound up. This is sort of a side peek for you. For a hardware product, we wanted not only robust software, burned into proms, we didn't want it being changed once it was installed, but we also wanted the delivered hardware, or at least sensitive portions of the hardware, to be robust in the presence of hardware failures, either natural or induced by malice. So we often performed or paid the developing contractor to perform a security fault analysis, an SFA, where cryptographically significant portions of the logic would be analyzed, assuming all possible input or output failures in every chip or component in the sensitive area. That includes each active device, AND gates, OR gates, switches, memory stage, etc. Everything. This could lead to a lot of time being spent, either by humans, if they're working on small-scale integrated logic or MSI, medium-scale integration, or if you're going to be working on LSI parts or even super LSI, these days you use computers and have programs run exhaustively over many nights to do the analysis. Contractors new to NSA processes were at risk of stumbling here. A contract could be perhaps for the whole task of build, review, shape, make a prototype, test. You know, the contract covered everything, but it also covered an SFA, and they could be 100 pages or more. However, it usually only took about 2 pages to describe the SFA process. It was very easy. Fail all the parts, tell us what they detailed the parts they want to look at, of course. But the SFA output can be many hundreds of pages, even for small pieces of logic. One small board of logic I was responsible for helping run the SFA on produced over 3 feet deep of 10.5 by 11-inch paper in fine font print to discuss the impact of all the various failure modes they found that were sensitive and should be addressed. They ditched the bulk of things that were benign or just made it do funny stuff, but it didn't hurt anybody. Okay? For unwary contractors on their first NSA effort, they might set the SFA price at 2% of total cost. The contract only had 100 pages. Usually work is burdened out in portions fairly evenly across all the tasks. SFA is only a 2-page description. Fine, 2% of our final cost, that'll cover SFA. Never happened, 5% minimum. We'd have to cancel them on the side, saying that's too parochial and trivial an analysis. Go back and think harder. You can add more to the bill. We'd rather you do it now than we pay a cost overrun later to get it done right. And we'd also help coach them. We'd send troops to the plant to help them do the first few stages till they saw what was really involved in it. It was a wake-up call for many of them. Environment testing was also required, stress testing to measure performance across a wide temperature range, salt fog penetration for the Navy, vibration for airplanes taking off the aircraft or decks, shock, etc. So there was a lot of analysis that went on to that. So NSA spent a lot of money not on improving the product from a marketability viewpoint. Is it pretty? Is it glitzy? Is the plastic nice? But will it survive harsh environments? Will it survive a malicious attack and not give up anything? There's a lot of extra stuff we would wrap in. Skyrocketing cost and skyrocketing delivery time, but it worked. And the commercial world has not yet produced a process that works. Please take a look at what we've done, wince at the cost. Swallow it. Build a product that is actually safe for your users. In any event, let's mutter on something else for the time being. If you want transportation in a benign environment, you design a car. If you want transportation in a highly malicious environment, you design a tank. Know what you want before you start. You'll avoid wasted effort and the real risk of designing in features that are good in a benign environment, but become severe flaws in a malicious one. The creator of the Internet, creators plural, of the Internet knew that malice was a serious issue. In fact, the first packet switch network proposal, written by Paul Barron and colleagues in 1964, employed information security techniques. However, the creators of the Internet, the engineers and stuff actually trying to get some prototype stuff built, pushed security aside due to the perceived difficulties or cost, and that is the start of our problems today. They were building a prototype. They wanted to get that out first, so they saw no need to assume malice among the 4 or so universities participating at that time in, quote, the web. So security issues which were dropped early on, assuming a benign environment. What happens when you go through that sort of a process? Well, bluntly, the Internet was not built to address the known threats. By design, the Internet, at least initially, naively relied on honesty of every network user and placed far too little emphasis on healthy mutual suspicion. After all, it was just 4 or so sites, and they all knew each other. In 2007, we had a fiscal credit bubble. In the United States, that rode on credit derivatives. That's a package of mortgages, this time around with some corrupt ones in there as well to even the load. That was the poison that was slipped in. It was an instrument widely used but little understood and even less analyzed. Widely used, little understood, less analyzed. This was and is a recipe for disaster. This pile of credit debt eventually imploded, leading to a long-lasting recession. In fact, many people say we're still struggling to get out of it. Today we have a trust bubble, riding on trust in electronic certificates, digital signatures, cryptography, and protocols that constitute the foundations of modern information security. These functions are responsible for enrolling users, data, and systems as trusted, whatever that means. We'll get to that in a moment. But they are not understood by the humans who use them, as with the fiscal bubble, a recipe for disaster. Human trust, which we think we understand, is limited by identity, who you are, the role, copper robber, capabilities, and intent. I trust my surgeon to operate on me, but not to do my taxes. He trusts his mechanic to work on his car, but I do not trust that mechanic on my doctor's say-so because I do not trust my doctor's knowledge of auto repair. Briefly, if A trusts B and B trusts C, in human space, A doesn't have to trust C. Okay? Human trust is sparingly given. It does not scale easily. It is easily revoked. Piss me off, it's going to be a long time before we're friends again. And it's hard to recover once lost. It is fragile, usually pairwise, and not transitive. That's the ABC chain. This limits scaling and usually keeps things local. Cybertrust as implemented today does not map to the way humans naturally reason about trust. In most circumstances, it merely asserts the validity of identity, not the roles, the capabilities, or intents that an identity might take on. It spreads easily and therefore widely, possibly crossing many domains, and it is hard to revoke. As a matter of fact, you can revoke it, but shortly after, the certificate issuer will issue a new certificate for the party because they cleaned up their act or it just got past the expiration date or whatever, and they're trusted again, perhaps without doing a damn thing to get any better. In any event, even worse, the issuing of identity assertions is according to the fourth thing. Anybody recognize that? It's not an NSA schematic for a box, I promise. Okay, that is a map of the 650 different certification authorities that sign certificates on the web. Most of them handle only their own domains. Many of them feel quite confident to do a certificate for anybody who sends them an email message, no matter where the hell they are or what they know about them. So there's the definition of internet trust. Now, once these certificates are in place, it is frequent for one certificate to endorse the next, to endorse the next, to endorse the next. So it chains like a mad fiend. So already I'm saying, what do you mean trust? Yes, we have a trust model in the internet. It has nothing to do with human trust, is what we would really expect the thing to perform for us. It's a very technical term as used in that community. In any event, this is really a major problem. This conceptual mismatch, or cognitive dissonance, if you will, between what humans expect and what cyber delivers is not understood by most people, even techies. I cannot stress enough how much this is one of our biggest major problems today. As with the credit bubble, this is a recipe for disaster. And a disaster can fall in one of two ways. Let's refine it a little bit. Okay, something's going wrong. Well, it's either because of the mismatch between what functionality humans expect and what they actually get. That's a conceptual flaw. It was just a bad idea that was laid out wrong, the model for the current internet, okay? Or it could be a implementation of what they get in cyber function is often flawed. Somebody's just misunderstood the specification and did it wrong, or they skipped a page, or things were wired backwards. So that is two levels. One is implementation error, and the other is conceptual error, and they can both bite you. I'll give more detail on that later. Let's give a specific example of how this can work against you. In the 1980s, you took a prescription to a local pharmacist and he filled it. When you needed a refill, you went back. The medicines you took were known to local doctors, local pharmacists, likely 3 to 5 people other than you. Almost certainly 10 or fewer souls. That's human trust. What do we have now? You still take your prescription to a local pharmacist, you tell him you'll be on a vacation and you'll need a refill, and ask for enough to last until you return. In the old days, they would do that, but we now live in the new modern days. Rather than give you an extension, he says, no problem, we have a pharmacy in that area. Just drop by and visit them, and they can look up your record and fill it there. Isn't that convenient? Yes, but at what cost? The number of folk who can access your medical data is now numbered in at least the high hundreds. Pharmacists across the whole, anybody who subscribed to that pharmacy fulfilling episode and all their client stores throughout the nation has your record on file, as well as, people in Timbuktu, for all I know. That is cyber trust today. Your medical records are now available to many, only a few of which really need access at any given time. This was not necessary. I leave it as an exercise for each of you, and you're a techie crowd pretty much. Take out pencil and paper and start trying this, to mentally design system modifications that could inhibit the exposure of your medical data unless you personally actively participate. It's a mere coding expedient that they did, not a necessity that led to this situation. Okay? Given the current system, are your risks actually increased? Well, maybe not. I might be making a big issue out of it. But assume your medicine is given almost exclusively to patients across the nation with a vile sexually transmitted disease. You don't have that disease. It's a niche market that you need it for the small amount of people having your problems. However, do you really want the information that you're taking that medication and no other information out there to be out on the web? The pharma case certainly carries greater risk of blackmail if you're using the open pharmacy model. A separate and compounding problem is that cyber trust functionality is implemented in software and hardware, which are marketed on glitz and ease of use, not on the quality or the accuracy of performance. Even if security concepts are accurately captured in the design and actually provide what naive humans expect, it is likely that the implementation is flawed. Ward Cunningham coined the term technical debt. How many of you have heard that name? Good. Go around and teach the rest of them. He used technical debt to describe flaws left in delivered products. His quote, technical debt accrues today when in the planning or execution of a software project, decisions are made to defer necessary work, with some items surviving across multiple development cycles. In other words, product releases with flaws. Leave it alone, we'll fix it in the next version that gets marketed next week. This is commonly called poor or brittle design, also extreme programming, which can lead to genuine fiscal debt, the cost to repair later. It's also called the Microsoft update cycle. And Microsoft does better work than most out there, believe me. I'd like to refine Ward's discussion just a little bit. I'd like to use the phrase technical debt to cover two types of debt: conceptual errors in the design of the product and implementation errors in the product as built. An example of a technical debt: one of the flaws fixed in Microsoft's February 2010 patch cycle was based on a zero-day attack, but the vulnerability it exploited had been undiscovered in the code base for 17 years. The vulnerability had been out there a long, long time, just not discovered, and that's all that zero-day announces. New to you guys, it's been here forever. That technical debt has finally been paid off, and it probably is more expensive this late date running around than it had been had they fixed it early on. Today's trust bubble products, rife with a huge pile of crippling, unaddressed conceptual and implementation debt, a 1-2 punch, are, as were the credit derivative products in 2007, widely used, little understood, and less analyzed. They're simply disasters waiting to happen. Let's go back and visit the pharmacy one more time. It has both types of tech debt. The design allows too many pharmacists to have easy access. That's the concept they wanted, but it's wrong. And the implementation probably contains cyber vulnerabilities that will let in additional folk, hackers and others as well, compounding your risks. So 2 levels of flaw there. Conceptual errors are best solved early with applied brain power during the design time. Smarts, not dollars, sometimes time, is most important. Implementation errors are typically found in deployed products and can only be solved once deployed with time and money, recalls, other such, usually lots of both. The better choice is for the vendor to pay the cost up front by using higher assurance development methods to eliminate the vast majority of implementation errors before deployment. But that might delay time to market. So the usual path is to shift the cost and effort away from the vendor and let the customer and his clients discover the flaws and suffer the consequences and wait months for the fix to come from the vendor anyway. I said in March 2010 at the RSA conference that we are ripe for a trust bubble meltdown with the same scale of consequences that the credit market suffered. I predicted it could, not that it would, but that it could happen within 3 to 5 years. I now feel we may have only long weeks to short months before we could feel even greater pain from the immense pile of debt, both conceptual and technical, that security vendors are carrying. What prevents it? I posit that hackers and others feel it is better to continue milking the cow long term, as opposed to killing it and having a steak for only a few days. It's a pragmatic observation on their part. What is to their advantage? Batter us too hard, or keep feeding us just enough hope that we don't change much and they keep bleeding the banks and whatever else they can get their hands on? Seems to me these guys aren't dumb, they're just immoral. The situation is now worse for at least 2 reasons. The Stuxnet malware and its follow-ons, Dooku, Flame, now Heartbleed, and others, make this problem worse since they set a new high watermark of quality and complexity that other hackers will try to emulate. They also provide code bases to bootstrap from, saving effort on the part of follow-on attackers. The stronger hacker teams seldom fire, the strong ones at least, will fire an attack bullet, and they don't do it without 5 to 6 better attacks already in their arsenal as well, so they continue pounding on you. They know that these attacks are strategic weapons and can be fired only once each, at least per target. The second reason the situation is worse is a cultural artifact, the WikiLeaks episode that released sensitive State Department cables. This is back in November 2010 when Clinton was Secretary of State. It was her statement at that time that this increased tension in world partners, especially in the Middle East. That could tempt one of them, now this is not her quote, it's mine, that could tempt one of them to actually strike at us out of spite. More recent events by Snowden have not helped either. Given events in the Middle East since the Arab Spring, it may well serve the purposes of some nation in that area to mount a hard-to-attribute cyber attack against the U.S. just to lower the odds of our interfering with them as they sort out their local issues on the ground between themselves. Please realize we're in desperate trouble. We have to dig out of this, or else the world economy is headed for a severe crash. Not just us, we'll take the world with us. We're moving at a snail's pace against an avalanche of malice. It is insane not to act. Surely this year's cascade of attacks against commercial firms, Neiman Marcus, Home Depot, Chase, many others, 10 or so others out there with massive, and how many of you picked up the newspaper that was offered yesterday in the lobby with a headline of almost 500 million attacks in the last 6 months alone having been executed? The pace is picking up, folks. The banks have got to be shaking in their boots. So, I'm here to tell you that your cyber systems continue to function and serve you not due to the expertise of your security staff, but due solely to the sufferance of your opponents. Okay? They've got better things to do than pick on you at the moment. You'll get your turn eventually, don't worry. On April 25, 2007, Sami Sadri, the CEO of the Cyber Defense Agency and president of Professionals for Cyber Defense, briefed a congressional committee on the detailed nature of the threat. They wanted to see just how bad could it be and spelled it out. Okay? And their assumption was, and this was a powerful team of many people, and it's been vetted many times, and this is 7-year-old data, and it is only getting riper. It hasn't changed in its impact. It's only gotten much, much cheaper to do. And what they wanted to start with was about to successfully mount a crippling, persistent, nationwide cyber attack on the U.S. in its entirety. His team assumed the adversary had 3 years of preparation, $500 million, and 30 days to actually execute the attack. The goal was to destabilize the U.S. and depress the economy with attacks on critical infrastructure. That was the primary thing they wanted to knock down, big bang for the buck. Okay? Thus redoing our ability to project military power, depleting our will to fight, and creating panic and distrust in government. Attacks on critical infrastructure. I'll expand that. I'm no longer quoting him. I'll just expand it for you. It means shutting down first responders who are warned that things are going wrong, please help, and also their backups that are signed in case they're not available. Then, since the alerting system is down, significantly cripple the flow of electricity, water, oil, gas, and rail service, among other critical infrastructures. The attacks would be continuing and varying for a full 30-day hold down for these services. Assume such an attack was launched in late winter in our northwest corner of the nation where it gets damn cold in the winter. Can you fill out in your own mind what could be happening at that time? If you're without food, power, light, water for 2 or 3 days in almost any nation, county, or state, you'll have people in the streets rioting within 3 to 5 days. 30 days down. In winter, cold, people freezing, I believe hundreds of thousands could die. This is an attack on national sovereignty. It's not an attack against individual citizens or businesses. I'll come back to a little more detail on this later. I believe their cost to successfully attack is today a generous upper bound. It's 7.5 years later. Such an attack could be mounted today given intent by an opponent. If they wanted us down, we would be down. I believe that. Of course, if they take us down, they take down a lot of other stuff, other people's infrastructures they use. It would have backlash to take us down that hard, okay? And that's the only thing protecting us, is that it would be enough splatter to make the guy think twice before trying. That's sad to my mind. Do you want to trust their self-interest for our protection? That's such a weak defense. The level of malice is going up. We need to act now to protect the nation's well-being. What do you actually need to protect when you're trying to? You cannot protect everything that's wrong in this country at the moment. Who are you going to go try to fix first? And that doesn't mean you're going to ignore everybody. You just have to allocate resources. But whatever funding level you would like to do uniformly across everybody, you'll put the lump of it on the worst problem and then allocate more to number 2, less to number 3, and less to number 4. You'll get around to them. And I do believe the strongest thing that we need to work on is infrastructure. That's the gas, the oil, the rail, electric power, etc. If not, people can die. And to me, that is a very powerful impact statement. The next tranche down, if you will, I think, is finance, banks, credit cards, stock market, that sort of stuff. And the attack in that case would be severe enough that the money flowing would simply vanish. It's not a matter that they try to steal it. It may not be their problem. They just want to leave nothing left for the rest of us. All your bank balances go to zero. Now, how do we start playing out that in the economy? How do we recover from that? Well, for one thing, I think you rapidly become a second-tier nation, not a first-tier nation, until you get that worked out where you at least get an economy that's moving. So money will certainly be lost, but anytime you lose money, that's pretty damn significant, especially nationwide. The commercial sector consisting of for-profit firms, Target, Home Depot, etc., or quality of life drops. You can't buy the stuff you want to quickly enough. You can't get daughters a new swimsuit, that sort of issue. In any event, and the last is just the citizenry. If you go after the citizenry, you don't have to. The first 3 levels take care of them. Parents, neighbors, children, etc. They're all impacted by any of the above. How will we judge if we're doing it correctly once we choose to act? So I'm going to change horses now, laid out all the gloom and doom of what we're going through. So now look at this bright, rosy future of how many weeks is it going to take to get out of it. Ha, ha, ha. We're looking at long, hard years because we've been digging this ditch for decades. Okay? And it's going to take time to get out of it. Okay? So I'm going to discuss specific technical approaches, things that can be done to start improving things. Even if you do nothing anywhere else, that piece does get improved. And when you get enough bricks improved, you can start asking the businesses to put bricks together and get into consortia and move on to larger architectures, not just good bricks, but architectures using those bricks to accomplish goals, an organic process for growing out of it. Okay? It'll help you gauge if your organization is doing security right and what the details might be in your specific case. These concepts can be understood by businessmen, even CEOs, as well as techies. Copies of this script will be available to those who want one, so do not try to memorize what I'll say now. That said, the following information is so important, if you do not explicitly address the following concepts in your business operations and security work, you cannot succeed. Now we're going to go through just some tech chatter on various simple tech. Nothing complicated, folks, no equations. Primacy, a lot of this is just concept stuff, to have the right concepts in place. Primacy, he who gets to the interface first wins. So get security and risk experts involved early in your company's operation and or designs, indeed at the very beginning, not as an afterthought. Recall my previous comment about wasting time designing a car when you really needed a tank? In the current climate on the internet, I assure you right now you need a tank. If needed, there are many established business-friendly security and risk management organizations out there that you can draw on in every country. Primacy of security is a simple concept. They've never wanted to give us primacy in the past. We have to go around and say it isn't much a choice anymore. The only way to get there right is to put it in at the substrata of the system you're building. If you put in mud instead of brick at the bottom for your structure, it will not live, it will not last under attacks. Robust control. What does that mean? Sensitive systems require robust control, defined as only authorized persons operating with valid permissions can control the system, subject to full audit and review of their specific individual actions at need. Where possible or needed, consider two-man controls. Example, in 2006, the Italian telephone system was used by corrupt intelligence agents for blackmail purposes against their own citizens. The former chief of security for the state was arrested. The targets they went after? Rich people. Magistrates, politicians, actors, sports players. The motive? Truly venal, blackmail, usually for money. According to Telecom Italia's own investigation, their procedures and machines used for legal wiretaps had a number of flaws, and it was technically possible to spy on the telephone conversations without leaving any trace. If you have a system with no trace file at all to track who did what to whom and when, even honorable people will be tempted. So why, why foster human nature to do bad things at inappropriate times? Trust but verify. Design in suspicion between peer processes. Suspicion is good for you in the security world. Be suspicious of everyone. I spent my career doing worst-case analysis. Made me paranoid, but I survive. And in between subordinates and their controllers. For business and technical people, check the context for transaction request. Does the request make sense? Employ a system of checks and balances to prevent fraud at all levels in the organization as an explicit goal from day one. Sanity check the inputs for each function. Software in an isolated address space can be used to check the requests received from some other isolated space. Software can monitor hardware. Hardware can monitor software for proper function, or at least proper timing. So there are three things that are just conceptual, but if they're not present, folks, those are gaping holes hackers will walk through. So let's go to the next set of three. Least privilege. No entity, whether human, hardware, or software, should have more privilege than absolutely needed for its core functions to work. In particular, avoid the case where one person has complete, unfettered control and access over your technical systems. Techies, you really do not want to be one of the prime suspects when there are confidentiality or fraud concerns around. Put checks and balances in place in the system against yourself so you can show that you are not a guilty party. It's the boss. Go get him. Okay? This is to your own self-interest, folks, as well. Because guess who they're going to blame first when things go wrong? The technical staff to put the gear in place to process the transactions. Start subsetting. Especially in computers, install the minimum number of simplest components, including operating system modules, needed to do the job. Example, when the World Wide Web was first implemented, many firms and government entities put up web pages to advertise their products, skills, or capabilities, and authorities. Hackers had a field day defacing such pages to the great chagrin of their owners. CIA and many other government agencies were struck, but never NSA. NSA could not afford to look that vulnerable, so great care was taken in designing the web page and its controls. One major design decision was stark subsetting. Nothing was in the machine other than the web page images and the absolute bare minimum of binary code needed to display them correctly. No operating system, no compilers, no support code of any sort, nothing but drivers and such for display. It was probably only a few kilobytes of binary code driving tables of what to wrap up on the page. Attackers might rarely gain entry, but they found nothing present to help them attach to the other processes that they expected would be present, that would let them piggyback into a true execution status instead of just standing in the door. Utter simplicity defeated them. Sometimes it doesn't have to be classy, folks. Go back to the absolute minimum Tinker Toy set you've got to play with and build from that. It's easier to analyze, too. Isolation barriers. Consider the use of high-assurance time and space partitioning microkernel operating systems, and then hypervisors on those microkernels as a way to reduce the attack surface of your critical systems and to isolate one component from another. Several vendors offer these technologies, and they can provide considerable gains, not perfection, but gains in security and functionality for systems needing high assurance and/or high integrity. If nothing else, it gives fairly clearly defined interfaces and boundaries where stuff passing back and forth might be checked. And they can each check in their own way on each side to make sure they're not the party receiving the gift that's coming in. Let's have another set of 3, and we should have some fun finishing this stuff up. Partitions and blinded interfaces. Banks often contract with, anybody here work with the banking industry? You can tell me later if this is still what they're doing or not, but I believe it is. Banks often contract with several firms to write their transaction systems. Bank employees design the overall system and partition the pieces to contract out for a build so that no one subcontractor knows enough to mount a successful attack. After all, your subcontractors could be malicious. Further, each subroutine is passed the minimum needed to do its job, rather than being given access to whole accounts. The point is that if an opponent does make an initial penetration, he sees as little as possible of what might help him go further. Also, complexity is usually needless in most cases. Delink complexity wherever possible. Minimize tight coupling. Don't expect something to come back to you in nanoseconds. Expect to say, attention, take care of, and the code you're talking with will knock down, let's say, job accomplished, down. And you have a crude clock running in the back. If it took him an hour instead of nanoseconds, something's wrong, and go do something else. So you can recover from that loss and continue functioning anyway. Okay? But don't have tightly coupled. Just because you know you can make the constraints tight, don't make them tight. Once in a while, you need a little slop, just to let the system be more robust and continue functioning. Our software code sequence is reasonable. This is from my career. Often people say, yes, we have these various routines that need to be executed before the job is finished. So we put a little box aside, and as each one gets done, it comes to put a little check mark. And at the end, before a product is released, the code comes in and checks all the check marks are in place. This can be released, it's released, and they wipe out the check marks and wait for the next thing to come through. That is one of the common things that they like to play with. But sometimes it matters the exact order you do things in. Let me give a trivial example from cryptography. I want to encipher a message. So I've got A, B, C, D, E, 5 steps. Those 5 steps are load crypto key, load plain text, encipher, transmit ciphertext, zeroize crypto key. If you do it in that order that I just announced, load crypto key, load plain text, encipher. Bingo, I've got an enciphered message, good to go. Transmit, it's out there, should be safe by now. Zeroize crypto key. Good hygiene. Don't leave it in the box for other people to find. But if you just swap the first and the last elements, okay, you do all of them, but let's do them in this order. Zeroize the crypto key. Okay, all zeros. Load plain text. Got it. Encipher. Zap. Encipher it with all zeros as key. It may look random coming out, but you're using the same key every time, and an all zero flush is an obvious state for somebody to test against. So all they do is have to test against a few fault conditions and stuff to see if they've got a goodie on their hands, and the enemy can now decrypt just as fast as your users can decrypt, okay, and determine what's going on. No gain at all, not good. So really, sometimes sequential order matters as well as doing everything in the basket, okay? And we also have to worry about another way of helping out on the code is cryptographic application programming interfaces. Now, cryptography is something that's a little murky to many engineers and others, and excellent software writers, but they aren't in the crypto business. So it's very nice to help insulate them to their side where they pay attention to the good stuff to make the box keep running, and the few little tweaks needed to keep the crypto robust is kept on their side. It helps blind the process a little bit as an interface and keeps it in proper domains. People who know crypto handle the crypto code. the application programmers know how to make it run sweet and clean and be cleanable up and all that sort of stuff are on their side of the interface, life is good. If you try to make a guy from either time do it all on his own shoulders, you're going to get problems, I promise. Okay, now that's just a few of the items rattling along the way that I talk about. Those are the specific technical things. Let's just step it up a little bit. No, a little bit more here. These are still at the techie level. Unfettered red team penetration efforts. Once you have a business process or computer system up and running, red team efforts are a good thing. That's when a select team of employees, or hired consultants, are free to study and attack the system, reporting back to you their findings. The results are almost always embarrassing and possibly shocking, but they shine a clear light on what needs to be fixed. Please, do not cripple the effort, as is often done, by setting, as a manager, certain parts of the system off limits to the attackers, usually because of, quote, "We know we have some problems there, don't waste your time," unquote. This is known as the big shoot yourself in the foot. In examining what you have already done, they will also find additional problems that you were not aware of at that time in this pot you were concerned about, and that will mess up the rest of the system if exercised. Do not unnecessarily tie their hands. It does no one any good, and it could lead to harm. Then physical security, cybersecurity, and human security. These three technical systems, fences and armed guards for the physical, computer technology and software for the cyber area, and for the human domain, clearances, polygraphs, competency exams, degrees to hire them by. Those three domains all interact. But oddly enough, they may be managed. When you're actually developing a product, they're all there, they're working with it, they all get their whack at it. But in the management structure of the corporation driving the thing, typically they're separate organizations. You've got a chief cop, head of all the cops, you've got a chief cyber goon, head of all the cyber guys, and you've got a human factors guy running the personnel exercises. And those managers don't talk together very often. They're just too far separated by their domains. But their employees are constantly making contact across domains to transfer things from one domain to the other. And so you have to be very careful in your threat analysis when you're going in to do these strike team attacks to test the system on the ground as it is, looking for the interactions between those domains, because it's those interactions sometimes where the flaws are. Not in the code doing just keeping the personnel records or just keeping track of the weapons issued to the guards. It's when you fail to check in the personnel records that the guy isn't cleared for weaponry, and then you go to the other side where they just give him the guns because it's part of the process. So you have to look for these, what I'll call technical interactions in the code base between those three separate disciplines, because the disciplines, by culture and nature, don't talk to each other very well. Okay, it is not just the bad guys that can cause damage. Cybersecurity is so fragile, even well-intentioned good guys can damage it. Sufficiently large quantum computers, once available, can use Shor's attack, a mathematician, to quickly gut the public key infrastructure underlying SSL and many other security functions. RSA, Diffie-Hellman, elliptic curve cryptography, etc., all these so-called public key algorithms. How many of you have read any of this at all? Do you see, are you aware that the reaction of public key algorithms to computer attacks and to quantum attacks are not the same as the reaction of those public key algorithms to regular computers or to quantum computers? These algorithms could be perfectly robust and fine on normal computers. They actually keep the opponent at bay, and you get a cost factor depending on the size of the key. It's all computable. But the public key stuff, in essence, because of something called entanglement that's looked for, and the public key processes deal with it they can't handle it in common computers, so they usually run a little slower. But they're just normal crypto, and to put the quantum computer that says, hey, I can entangle all these things, and with the equivalent of one clock pulse, bang, the answer falls out. Doesn't matter how big the key is. So this truly sufficient and powerful enough quantum computer, all the various trust mechanisms in the web die. Now, how far off are we from having to face that, if at all? Perhaps it's still just a wet dream in the mind of physicists out there thinking about it. Okay? Turns out there's a commercial firm, D-Wave, currently marketing small to medium scale quantum computers. They only have a few customers. NSA is one. We bought one of their toys. It's out at the Utah site currently. The question is, can they scale up in size, and if so, how fast? Ralph Merkle thinks such quantum machines may be available in as little as 10 to 20 years. It could take up to 5 years or more to find and bless new quantum computing resistant public key crypto processes, or processes that have the same properties they have. The reason people like the public key stuff is that to transmit messages securely, all you need, A wants to talk to B, and A and B can sort it out among themselves to get a key, and they talk. No third party. Most other traditional crypto processes, AES, DES, and others, you need exactly the same key in both equipments, and you get it from a third party, C. A and B talk to each other, but they need a key management site to negotiate a common key for them and ships it down to them. The public key has the nice property that if you want a little more privacy, it's just you and me, A and B, that know. But giving up that third-party control introduces the quantum vulnerability. That appears to be the look of the things going on at the current time. In any event, so once you make the decision that you're going to try to defeat them, you first have to find algorithms that will in fact conceptually a quantum computer. They don't exist yet in reality for good, heavy purposes like this, okay? But they should be studying now, under the assumptions that they're using to build them, what do I have to do to maintain trust in the web when they do become mature enough to use? Public key processes, the 10-year it'll be a 15-year interval. It takes at least 5 years to run an algorithm contest, even if you've got some algorithms to put in it, as happened with AES. It was long years of people just doing work outside, trying to find other things that might be standardized before NIST finally said, there's enough competitors out there, let's run a competition. And then that took a few years to run, to vet one, and as more years on top of that before standards bodies started making it okay to use them legally for certain purposes. The internet is not efficient in doing management like that. It is not a structured organization with one commander-in-chief that says march and everybody falls in line. It's a bunch of small communities all interacting for the common good to get things done. And sometimes they just disagree and don't move fast enough. Around the year 2000, quantum computing was predicted as being about 50 years in the future. That'd be 2050, if it occurred at all. Now, in the year 2014, many feel it'll be here in about 20 years, and several feel it could be here in as little as 10, 2024. That's not enough time, folk, to get all the algorithm stuff necessary put in place to defend against it, if it could come that fast. So our only hope is pray every night, please let there be a glitch in the current process in quantum computing, which is ramping up and becoming very dramatic. Having said that, I'll put on this sour news for you in this. In 2014, 4 major commercial labs, in the past, most quantum computer research was in a few government labs, primarily Los Alamos National Labs in New Mexico, a few others. In 2014, 4 major commercial labs, Microsoft, IBM, Northrop Grumman, and Bolt Beranek and Newman Technologies, are doing research on different paths to getting to quantum computing. And they're putting significant millions of dollars against it, each. They have been talking to the physicists in the various research labs, and techies just doing the technology extrapolations, building nothing, just writing papers, getting published in journals. But they see enough promise that this could now be marketed, and so they're jumping into the development phase. Okay? As a matter of fact, it's really interesting. That was in early October. Pardon me. I got the 4 companies working. Now, it's October 2, 2014. That's much more recent. That's this month. A long-sought ion by physicists were looking for this thing, the Majorama fermion. Now, I'm not sure if it is spelled major, M-A-J-O-R-R-A-M-A, but I think it was somebody's nationality, and I'm sure the language spoken if the J is silent or not, but it's either Majorama or Majorama fermion. It's been predicted by theorists to have to exist. Physicists think, just to put in the notch of all the other stuff we know about the weird world out there in very small particles, there should be one of these, but they never found one. Well, they found it, and they did the equivalent of taking photographs of it and doing a full analysis of its behaviors. It fits exactly all the things that theory predicted it ought to be able to do, including as a side effect of being a marvelous device to use to fill out register stages in quantum computers, with very low, very significant reduction on noise and error rate in computations, so registers don't have to be long to carry an error-correcting tail on them. This is damn good news, another spur to getting there quicker over time. Multiple players pursuing different technologies will speed up emergence of quantum computers that can threaten the security of the web. Okay? So it's a real, genuine threat. Any of you have any touch with people with company and stuff, start kicking their butts, make them move faster. The rest of us will whimper and wait, see what happens. Now again, it's dual-use technology. It can do wonderful things on building new, safer drugs for humanity. They'll give us much better weather forecasts. They go out longer and be more accurate, and very locally tell you within a block or two of where the hurricane will hit instead of just the city that's going to get hit. All that can come with quantum computing. There's good stuff to come out of it. It just has this little nice side effect that it kicks the ass out of the web on trust, as far as putting money out there, moving it around. For the sake of future robust security for the internet, we have to lean forward, anticipate, and plan ahead. It's not about expediency or being first to market. It's about the product being good enough to market. Face it, the internet is too important today for both citizens and corporations. Whether you like it or not, it's become a de facto utility. Get over it. Utilities get regulated, either by adequate self-regulation or the government will step in. So far, the commercial sector, it may still be your choice, but not for long if you do not act. Compliance regimes I will skip. We don't need to hear about that. For the blast readers in the audience, you can take a quick look. I will chip this out too. Sadly, I'd like to compare how NSA interacts with contractors building our gear and how commercial people interact with designers, but I'll skip it. Okay. We have our work cut out for us. Let's get to it. Thank you for your time this morning. My apologies for running into your lunch.